You are not getting kills, not making plays, and dying far too much. This is simply because you have bad positioning, and having great positioning changes everything you know about Marvel Rivals, and I would say it's the singular most important thing if you want to become a great Marvel Rivals player and stop throwing in your games. Now, if you have a friend, an enemy, or nade shot to send this to, definitely do that and smash that like, subscribe, and let's jump into it. So let's imagine you're standing in the middle of a point and you're winning that fight, but all of a sudden you hear that hella ult. You try to get away, but you get mown down and killed, losing the fight and ultimately losing the game. But what if you could have lived? What if you could have backed away? What if you could have survived? All of a sudden, a game you lost would have been a game you won, and that's the importance of having good position. So what exactly is good positioning versus bad positioning? Well, bad positions make you less effective and more prone to dying. You're gonna die to abilities, ultimates, and just regular fire more, and you're gonna be less effective at healing, less effective at making plays or doing damage. But good and great positioning is gonna make you more effective at all these things while simultaneously dying less, making you an all-around better player. That's why it's so important. But a lot of people will come to me and say, Mills, why can't you just tell me where to stand? Where should I play from? And this is the problem. There is no perfect position because positioning is directly dictated by what ultimates you know are available, what character you are, what character your opponents are, and the state of the fight as a whole. Who's alive, who's dead, where is everyone positioned and playing from? This changes what position you're in and if it's good or bad. Like, I could be standing next to a health pack and I'd be like, oh, this is a good position. But if there's like 5 enemies on me, it's a bad position. And I know this is an oversimplification, but I need to harp it into you that there are rules to follow to have a good position. There isn't a perfect place that is a good position. Now let's go over these rules for perfect positioning. The first one is natural cover. So these are the covered places around the map that you can use to deny enemies line of sight on you. So let's say, for example, you're fighting an enemy and you don't want to fight them anymore, and you're next to a wall. You can go behind that wall. Now, keep in mind that some pieces of walls will be destroyable, so they are not going to be denying information, but normal pieces of cover are going to be able to deny abilities, fire, and information on the enemy. And this is super important because a piece of cover allows you to decide when you are fighting. So let's just say I'm in a Hela duel, right? And that Hela is standing in the middle of the open, and I'm standing by a piece of cover. If I hit her once, hit her twice, okay, I'm going to win that duel, and I'm going to keep fighting her. But if she hits me really hard and I'm really low, well, I can choose not to fight her, and she has to invest an ability to come after me if she wants to fight me, or she just has to keep running after me while I get to run away and go any number of directions because she doesn't have information on me. You see how the information advantage is on me because not only can I see third person, but also I get to choose when we're fighting. So if I'm ever losing, I get to say, nah, I don't want to fight anymore. But if I'm ever winning, that Hela cannot get away from me because she's standing next to no cover. That leads me to my first major positioning principle, which is good positions give you good options for how you play out a fight, depending on a number of actions. You could be playing in one spot, but the second a Star-Lord pops an ult, you would like to be able to not instantly die to that ult. But if you're playing out in the open, your options are limited and you're probably just gonna die. The more options you give yourself and the harder you make it for an opponent to be effective, because yeah, that Star-Lord could technically chase you, but he has to go around the corner, he has to commit to the fight, maybe he's more susceptible to dying himself, or maybe he can only kill you instead of 3 or 4 people. All of this makes your positioning better than if you were just out in the open, really easy for him to pick off. Now, I will say in general, because of the player model in Marvel Rivals, being on the left side where a door frame is on your left and you're peeking out your right is going to be generally better positionally than peeking from the left side of your character with the door frame on your right, because the bullets are going to be coming from the left side and you cannot flip your character model. So this is going to allow you to line up your crosshair on a target, peek out and shoot them, and then go back behind cover before opponents can even react to it. And it's incredibly busted on a character like Hawkeye, who could even charge his bow without even peeking enemies and get that one shot. On top of that, if you're playing any sort of diver or character that wants to go in on the back line, you can wait in a corner and look and just kind of monitor if any enemies are going to go this flank route, get information while enemies have no information of you, and then if they ever come that route, they're walking right into you, and if they're not, you know the coast is clear. The other part of information that's really important is about high ground. High ground is incredibly strong because it gives you a vantage point on the enemy. Not only is it harder for them to shoot you than it is for you to shoot them. When you're on the high ground and they're on the low ground, they have to be aiming up. Your body is going to be partially covered by the ground. The ground itself is also a form of cover where if I back up from the high ground, they can't see me anymore. But if they're on the low ground underneath me, unless they have another piece of natural cover, they can't hide from me. And also, there are a ton of cooldowns and abilities that are a lot easier to throw down on an opponent, and they're not going to have an easy time shooting upwards. But I think one of the most powerful aspects of controlling a high ground is the fact that you, once again, can dictate when to take a fight. Like, let's say that I'm fighting a mantis, a cracked mantis, right? And I'm a winter soldier, and I'm shooting her from the high ground. They get a dink on me. They can't chase me up. They can't get up there in any way. So I back up, I regroup, I go find a health pack. They cannot take that fight with me. But what if I get them low and they start to run away? What can I do? Well, I can instantly jump off the high ground, chase them down, kill them, wipe them, and then maybe go back up to the high ground afterwards. You see how me being on the high ground allows me to force that fight. And in the flip situation, that mantis dinks me, I can't get away from that mantis. I know they're going to chase me, so I'm going to have to try to make a play, or I'm just going to die, and I probably will. Understanding that, once again, just like with natural cover, high ground gives you options, and that's one of the many reasons why it's so strong. Now, this also means that if you are trying to take an objective that's on the low ground and the opponents have the high ground controlling the area on the objective, yeah, you could go beeline to the objective, but then you're in a less favored fight. And maybe you'll get one tick, but you'll all get wiped. And that's why you typically want to route around the map, try to find a way to take that high ground, whether it's stairs, a teleporter, or direct mobility, a way to take the fight to the enemies on the same ground as them. And if the enemies are all holding point, you can go take that high ground to get in a position to shoot down on them, and it gives you all those options. It makes you more effective, and you will win the long game because you have a better, safer, more effective position than your opponents. Now, the other thing that you need to consider when trying to duel enemies and just be generally effective is called your effective range. What is your character's most optimal range? And it's typically multiple ranges. Like, a character like Bucky has a close range that he's pretty effective in, and he's also fairly effective in mid-range, but anything past that, and he's not going to be effective at all. Characters like Black Widow, for example, only want to fight from distance, while they could be okay at close range. Many other characters that are actually close-range characters are going to have a huge advantage when they take the fight in that close proximity, including tanks. So typically what you're looking out for when you're trying to be effective is find a mismatch and abuse that mismatch as much as possible. So if I'm Black Panther, I'm up against a Hawkeye, my goal is to find that Hawkeye and take a close, effective fight with that character. I'm trying to peek him as little as possible from range and get him the least amount of chances to kill me before I'm in my effective range. This means I'm routing around the map. This means I'm being really patient, and this means I'm not peeking him in the open until I'm ready to fight him, because I don't want him to even have a chance to dink me, to kill me, to get damage on me until I'm in my effective range. And from his point of view, he is recognizing that the Black Panther's on the enemy team. He's trying to find and scout where the Black Panther is going. And if the Panther is wrapping left, he's wrapping counter to the right on the other side. He's going the opposite direction, like in a circle. The Black Panther's rounding one direction of the circle, he's rounding the other direction of the circle, constantly trying to keep distance and be as far away from that Panther as possible, effectively giving him more chances in his effective range to mess up that Panther cycle by doing damage on him or maybe even kill him. Understand that this is the song and dance that all high-level players play at, and if you don't understand this song and dance, you can't even begin to operate at a high level in a game like Marvel Rivals. Like, for instance, a good Hawkeye player is not someone that just hits dinks over and over again. A good Hawkeye player will get 5, 10, maybe even 15 more shots than a bad Hawkeye player to do the same thing. At that Black Panther, for instance, or at anybody. So they're simultaneously better mechanically and hitting better shots, but they don't have to hit these high-pressure shots on such a short time frame because their positioning gives them that flexibility, that freedom to actually be effective for longer without being under constant threat. Now, Now, in general, for good positioning, you also need to keep in mind advantage versus disadvantage of you versus the enemy. You could be playing in a spot normally where you're like, hey, I'm playing in this spot. If enemies want to come at me, like all of them just bum rush me, I'll probably die, but they would have to take so much damage, sacrifice so much of their ground that my team will 100% win this fight because the opponents literally have to int in to get me. And so you know that that's a good position, and that might be a great position. But as the fight starts to play out, as people start to die, as your teammates start to get picked, and people start to lose their cooldowns or start losing health, your position becomes easier and easier to contest for less of a cost by the enemy. So recognize a position you were playing in earlier that was too hard, too risky for your opponents to take. Now, all of a sudden, it's something that's directly contestable, and you need to kind of feel that writing on the wall. As your team loses more and more ground, more advantage, you need to position more passively relative to that so that you don't get yourself in a position where you thought it was good, and it was good at one point, but because of the state of the battle, it's no longer good. There's a ton of parallels with this line of thinking to like old battle strategies used in war because they're literally the same ones. Now, a positioning concept that I really want to explain that's super important, especially for DPS and supports, is called off-angling. And it's the idea of not all playing together, but attacking the enemy from an adjacent source. So let's say your main team is all pushing in one area, one section, right? They're pushing from the front, let's say. And you, as like a DPS and ideally a support as well, are pushing from an adjacent off-angle. And you would ask, why would you do this? Why would you not all play together? Well, there's a couple of things. All playing together means that y'all have the damage from one direction. So if the opponents have a piece of cover, they can hide behind all of you. All of your damage, all your abilities, they can use that piece of cover to decide not to fight y'all. And when y'all are trying to take ground, this is really frustrating because they can just stop peeking when they're low and then peek y'all when they're full. And the only way to blitz them is by going around the cover and on them. But the entire time, you're going into bad positions, right? You're running into the open, you're doing all these things. But an off angle means you have an adjacent line of sight to the same area, meaning that your opponents can't use the same piece of cover to protect from both things. Like, have you ever been playing a spot, you've been fighting one group of people, and then all of a sudden you're being shot from the side? That puts a lot of pressure on you, and it's a great positional move by your opponent. And it's typically your job to either kill or flush that off angler out as quickly as possible, because if that person gets to stay there, they get to be super effective. And that's what you need to be creating as a DPS player, and typically assisted by a support player. The reason being, if you're a DPS and you take a little bit of damage from an off angle, you typically have to run away, because if there's no one with you, then you're just gonna have to leave. And this is a great way to flush out people on an off angle. But if an off angler has a support, they cannot be flushed from that position very easily, and they're even harder to push because you're pushing right into a support. Like, imagine a Punisher with the Mantis. All of a sudden, that Punisher's more effective, getting healed. Both of them are doing damage from a different angle from their team. And if they get pushed, the Mantis sleeps them. The Punisher shotguns them. So they're really hard to push unless they're pushed by a joint amount of people. And they're impossible to just poke and force out. So yeah, it could be kind of like a problem that your opponents can't solve with your good positioning. Now, when the enemy team is super low and your team has massive resource advantage in HP, abilities, or whatever the case may be, you want to close in that fight. This means foregoing positioning and kind of collapsing on the enemy, finishing off, the Magnetos, finishing off the Stranges, closing everyone out and wiping them. You could have played in a nice, good position that made you effective and hard to kill, and you won the fight because of it, but now it's time to go in, close out the fight, finish everything off so that you wipe them all, get all that ult charge, and then you can go back to your good positions. Don't just stay there while some of your team pushes in and you don't. Some people die, and then you're like, they overextended, but really, if you went with them, you could have wiped them. So don't run into this problem. Understand when an enemy is someone that you can kind of flatten with your advantage, and you can throw positioning to the side. Positioning is just a tool, and in that moment, it's not a needed tool. In fact, the best thing that you could do is actually throw it out the window and go crush that like 1 or 2 people that are half HP that are trying to just squeak their way out or hold on for reinforcements when they really should be killed. Now, something else that you should position by when you can is by health packs. And being able to control health packs is really important to win a lot of duels. Like, if you're playing in a room with a health pack, and a diver comes at you, you want to make sure that you can grab the health pack before them. And typically when anyone comes after you, you back up towards the health pack, making sure that you secure that resource. It's almost like a free ability that you just got to heal yourself with the burst of healing. And when enemies are fighting you and you are playing near a health pack with the intent of using it, backing up into it and making it so your opponents can't grab it, this could be another thing that strengthens your positioning, because it's literally a free resource that will be there every single fight. The last thing that you should consider is things like ultimates that could dramatically change how you position. Certain ultimates require you to play separate, play together, make sure that you're aware of them, conserve cooldowns. All of these things can be game plans that can help you deal with ultimates. But first, you have to recognize opponents probably have them, make a game plan, and try to do something to minimize its effectiveness. Typically, all of that starts with good positioning that gives you options if your opponent uses that ult. Now, you might be saying, Mills, I get these concepts, but I don't know how to apply them to my games. Go to your replays where you can watch all your recent games and go look at every single death you had and take a look at where you were standing, where you were playing, and how did those deaths line up with these positioning guidelines? Where did you make a fundamental mistake? Relate that to your gameplay and try to do better in the next game you play. I hope you learned something in this video, but if you have any questions, definitely let me know in the comments down below. Do me a solid and smash that like, subscribe, and send this to someone who you think desperately needs it. But anyways, thank you so much for coming by. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.